automatically recorded everything, but then that meant there were hours of all kinds of things being recorded, and that seemed ridiculous. So I've been trying to remember to record. I think I should put something on my computer that says, if it's a class, start recording. So anyway, the more philosophical reason that the court explained so thoroughly is for their own legitimacy. Political legitimacy refers to the idea that a people within a society believe that the people in places of power are rightfully there. It's not saying that they agree with those people. It's not saying they like those people. So for example, every 4 years when we elect a president, generally elections are pretty close in the grand scheme of things. So roughly 50% of the people don't like the choice, but they recognize it as legitimate because they were elected, they followed the rules of the game. So in terms of presidents and legislatures, election gives them their legitimacy. We accept that they're there because they were duly elected. When it comes to the federal courts, which are appointed rather than elected, and they're charged with interpreting a constitution, interpreting the law, they get their legitimacy from being able to explain what they do and having people be able to follow it and say, that's a fair interpretation. Now, half the time people don't, like what the court did, but if all the Supreme Court did was hand down a decision, then we'd be left to wonder, are they doing this in good faith? But when they step by step say, look, here's what the law in the past is, here's the most reasonable way to apply it to this situation that's consistent with what we've done before in the Constitution. All courts, to get legitimacy, somebody who's knows a little bit about the courts and has read some stuff. So all of you who've taken classes where you read some court opinions, you'll follow it and you'll say, that's a reasonable interpretation. I may not agree with it, but yeah, they're laying out those steps, it's plausible, and you made a decent case for it. Maybe I think the more persuasive case a little bit was a different interpretation. But yeah, at the end of the day, I read it and say, I don't like it, but that's fair. You have legitimacy as an institution. And so that's the more philosophical reason they explain so thoroughly what they do. And then you'll talk about the rule of law established again, and that takes a little practice. And by the way, you're gonna get some stuff wrong, and I don't take off a ton of credit for that because it gets better over the time. I mean, I take note of it, and generally if I just correct these things a couple of times, you get the hang of it. Nobody writes their first case brief and it's just like all excellent, perfect. It really is something that takes some practice. So the rule of law is looking at that case, going forward, what's the general principle going forward? And we'll do some practice on that. And then the last part, the reflection, this is just an attempt to get you to think about the case a little bit. Like, were you surprised by what the court did? Did they seem to get it right to you? And so I follow that with just an example. I briefed a case, Greece versus Galloway, which is a establishment clause case. And I just tried to show you. Now I want you to write the rationale for all of the different opinions that are written in a case. And what I mean by that is that there are different, when the court writes an opinion, it can come out in different forms. Sometimes it's unanimous, and that means that all 9 justices, one of them wrote it, but all 9 justices signed on. Sometimes you get an opinion where they didn't agree, so you can have a majority opinion and dissenters. And sometimes you get a majority opinion, and majority just means that at least 5 of the 9 justices were willing to vote with that person who wrote the opinion. And the dissenting opinion can be anywhere from 1 to 4, because if it veers over to 5, it's no longer the dissenting opinion. 1 to 4 justices sign on and say, the majority got it wrong, and here's why. And they clearly explain their reasons too, in the hope of someday, you know, it's not unheard of for the dissenting decision of today to become, years down the road, a couple of decades later, the majority opinion. You know, maybe when either times have proved that the dissenters were right, even to the people who wrote an opposing majority, or more often, it's that majority, one or more people from that majority have retired, they hear a similar case, and now it's a majority of the dissenters that are in agreement. And then there's another kind of opinion. There's an opinion called a concurring opinion. A concurring opinion can appear with either a majority opinion. You can have somebody who voted with the majority, but they author a concurring opinion, or you can have somebody who concurs with the dissenters. They vote with the dissenters, but they write a concurring opinion. A concurring opinion is one in which they're voting with them. They agree with at the end of the day, yes, this side wins and this side loses, but they have a different legal argument for getting there. I could give you an example, but it'd be too convoluted and probably do more confusing than clarification. So like I said, if you've made and throughout this class is tough. These are tough concepts. This class is tougher in a way than my constitutional law class, because those doctrines in regular areas of civil liberties, there's some stuff that evolves and changes, but there's an awful lot that's agreed upon and understood. This course is tough, partly because some areas are evolving and it's a newer area law, and partly because the idea of Homeland Security and what parts of those concepts invoke parts of civil liberties in the Constitution is so broad. You know, your book in its introduction says this book is a mile, miles wide and an inch deep. And we don't cover every chapter in the big book. It's too much. So this is a tough class. All I'm asking for, like in the take-home exams, when we get there, is I want to see demonstrated a good faith effort to grapple with some really difficult problems. And if I see that, we're all good. Okay. Speaking of difficult problems, I sent you an email a few minutes before class started that talked about what is Homeland Security. And did you all get that email? Okay, so in that article that I lifted that from, the author categorizes the definition of Homeland Security into 7 different types of definitions, and he categorizes them based on what they tend to focus on. So we're going to do a little exercise. I found out in my last class that I know how to do breakouts, and I'm pretty excited about this. We're going to do it again in this class. So what I'd like for you to do, I'm going to break you up into small groups for about 5 minutes. And I want you as a group to come to a consensus about which of those definitions is the best. I'm not saying perfect, but which one would you come to? And then if you were to pick and choose, like, how might you combine them? So, which one is the best? And if you were going to come up with your own definition, which ones would you combine? And in that discussion, and number 7 isn't really an option of a choice. Number 7, he's just saying, because he's kind of facetious, I forget the little label he uses for it, but he describes it as, these definitions, people are saying the idea of Homeland Security is just a way to strip everybody of their civil liberties. That one obviously is kind of facetious or sarcastic in its, but of the other 6 definitions, which one best fits with your sense of what Homeland Security is? And just talk about it. So let's see, there's 21 of you. Let's put you into 6 rooms. Okay, and you'll be in there about 4 or 5 minutes, and then I'll send the 1-minute warning. So Tyler, go ahead and join the breakout room. There should be something that pops up that says, do you want to join this room? And you go ahead and you accept, I think is the word, or join. Okay. So I think just about everybody's back. So let me put the, so here's, oh, wrong screen. There we go. Our 7 definitions. So when you were in your groups, which one did you tend to think was the best definition of Homeland Security?
My group chose 6.
Okay, how come?
Just because it seemed like it covered like the most amount of like topics that could have been like covered under it. And we said that if we we're gonna put any of them together, we'd put 3 and 6 together.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you. Anybody else? Don't be shy.
We said like the all hazards one.
Okay.
Because it says, I mean, it pretty much covers a lot too. To prevent and disrupt the terrorist attacks, like protect against man-made and natural hazards, and like respond to and recover from the incidents that do occur.
Okay.
So that like covers a lot.
Okay. Anybody else? And actually, you can, in your chat, you can put which one that you selected, your group selected, if you want. And you can just say number 6, or you can even just put 3 or 6 or whatever. Let me see. And we got 1 person that responded in chat. The all hazards, okay. 6. So let's take a look at what the United States Department of Homeland Security actually says on their webpage. You know, what is Homeland Security? And it's sort of a weird term. Like, they didn't say national security, which, you know, Homeland Security, although the terms are often used interchangeably, there is a sense that it means something a little bit different. So when I say that there seems that there would be a difference between national security and Homeland Security, what do you think might that difference hint at? If one of you is being really eloquent right now, you're still muted. I know someone's probably given this great answer.
Well, Homeland Security would be more focused on like the homeland. So like
Right.
just protecting the United States.
Yeah, and really focused, yeah, as opposed to national security, which in a way has a more outward focus. I mean, you're still, obviously there's a lot of overlap, but yeah, it suggests that there's some work that you do inside as well as a lot of work outside. So here's their main page. If we go to About DHS, they have their mission. And so that was, I saw something different when I was looking at this. Let me, that's, okay, so if we go to the mission, then we see some of the components we saw in those definitions. So the counterterrorism, cybersecurity, being just prepared for all kinds of things, border issues, economic security, which kind of makes it kind of broad. That might mean that we take certain actions, either economic or military in other parts of the world to achieve trade goals. And then of course their goals with their own population. And then if we go to, we are DHS, they have a little 3-minute thing that kind of talks about who they are. So I need to reshare using the computer sound. Let's watch this.
Secret Service protecting the new president.
It was a record-setting year with GSA officers confiscating more than 2,600 firearms nationwide.
I want to say how grateful I am to all of the law enforcement who worked together, who brought their A game.
In a single year, the Coast Guard and Border Protection intercepted an astonishing $10 billion worth of drugs on the way to America.
This is the most sophisticated tunnel that has ever been discovered along the border.
ICE enforcement and removal operations arrested 331 criminal aliens and immigration violators.
HSI arrested more than 1,200 from gangs across the U.S.
1,000 child victims were identified and rescued, with Homeland Security investigations agents arresting nearly 3,000 child predators.
2 weeks since historic flooding left thousands of Houstonians underwater, FEMA has opened 4 disaster recovery centers in the hardest hit areas.
The U.S. Coast Guard came through with flying colors, rescuing 33,000 people.
So it's kind of an interesting video. And by the way, when you go and you look at the Department of Homeland Security, every once in a while, they put up different videos about who they are over time in different, administrations. What are the impressions that you're left with? Like, what were some things you, like, for example, I was struck, this is the first time I've seen that one. There was really an emotional appeal in terms of like the music and the visuals. The other thing that I noticed right off the top, I don't know what year this one was made. I'd really like to know, because, and here's why I'd like to know. I thought it was interesting that the first American people they showed was a family of color. And I thought, is that like a Trump administration attempt to say this is not about race, or was that made under a different administration? But it was definitely sending a message of, hey, this isn't, this is about everybody in America is diverse and stuff. What other kinds of things did you notice about it?
Like the importance of protecting the president?
Yeah, they did make a big deal about that, and the music kind of got a little bit dramatic at that part. Kind of superhero spy, like, yeah, anything else?
Just to go back to like the music aspect, I mean, it was really, I would agree with like the superhero aspect. It almost seemed like it was like a trailer for almost like an action movie, really.
Yeah, it did have that feel to it. And this one, I have to say, is far and away the best production value of any of these I've seen. I mean, they were not going for an intellectual definition of what they do. This was very much, well, in advertising, they used to have a saying that you're not selling steak, you're selling sizzle. Here they were really selling the sizzle, rather than the bare bones of what the other videos that they've made have been a little bit more just literal. Here's what we do and why we do it. Yeah, any other things like, did that video correlate with what you already kind of thought of as what the Department of Homeland Security does, or was it a little bit different?
So I thought that it was pretty like on to what I was thinking, because I feel like Homeland Security, like it's pretty broad. You would think that it would cover a lot. So that video just like showed a lot of the stuff that you would expect, I guess.
Yeah, and they highlighted stuff that you might not automatically think of right away, like that one drug bust, and you could tell several of them were associated with drug busts.
They should make a new one with
oops, I didn't mean
coronavirus and everything.
That's a great idea. Of course, then they might have to wear a mask and then go counter. But yeah, that's a great idea. I wanted to do something real quick. So based on our definitions, which one do you think that their video most closely tracks with?
I'd say number 6.
Yeah, I think, although in tone, it almost got into number 5 in a way. It's kind of like, we're there, man. If this is bad for us, we're there. I don't think it came out and said that, but it almost had that emotional appeal that we're going to preserve America. So anyway, this whole exercise was just to get at the idea that amongst scholars, any book that I would have picked that dealt with Homeland Security would have had a slightly different definition. And the whole idea of it encompassing so much goes back to September 11th. And September 11th is going to play a key part throughout this course in terms of everything in this realm changes after September 11th. We used to have things dealing with international affairs, the spying and the CIA. That was all kept very separate from things internal, like the Federal Bureau of Investigation and so forth. And by design, it wasn't an accident. So one of the things after September 11th, when they were having all of the hearings and all of the commentary, and people were saying the FBI and the CIA weren't communicating, and they said it as if they had fallen down on their jobs. They weren't communicating because the law said that they shouldn't at that time, because there had been abuse of using external tactics and tactics that are for internally during especially the Nixon administration. And the idea that if you're going to prosecute somebody for a crime, you have to have followed constitutional guidelines that you don't have to follow when you're looking into the affair, like spycraft. And so that was by design. And now we've collapsed a lot of those, which is part of the reason that there are more constitutional issues now, because what is Homeland Security? Is it law enforcement, or is it war? Is it reaction in terms of the usual criminal justice model, or is it prevention, like the way we handle external threats in the United States? And so that's a lot of what we're going to be looking at, because the Constitution operates very differently in the context of normal criminal justice than it does when it's an emergency, whether that emergency be war, and that's the most specific, well-defined of the emergencies. But the laws in the Constitution do allow for different behavior from our government actors in times of emergency. And so one of the things that makes the September 11th era different is they were using the language of war in a context in which it wasn't the normal type of war. A war was something very well defined, where a sovereign and another sovereign, their legislatures had declared war on each other. And you knew when it ended, when one of the sovereigns said, okay, we give up. When it's a war on subnational actors, terrorists that aren't associated with a particular state, particular country, when does it end? It's like, declaring a war on poverty or crime, only this time using it as more than a metaphor, bringing all the legal and tactical things that we have to the front. So anyway, those are some of the issues that we'll be struggling with throughout the semester. So again, there's a reading list up there. I'll get your calendar up tomorrow, and I look forward. So we decided, I was having several senior moments last week. We decided we're only going to meet on Mondays in this class. Is that right? Or did we? Yeah, because most of you didn't want to meet at all. And I said, well, sorry, that's not going to happen. So that was our compromise. So, and I'll be having some more discussions and whatnot, so just keep watching. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday. Bye.
Dr. Torges?
Yes.
I wanted to ask you a question. So a couple semesters ago, I took Fundamentals of Homeland Security with Dr. Perry.
Right.
And I wanted to know if there was is there going to be points where this could intersect what I learned in that class?
Oh, sure. She was approaching it from
a different standpoint, but
right, more of a policy thing. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of overlap conceptually. Like, I'm sure she talked about definitions and stuff. And then we're going to eventually get more into the nitty gritty of what the Supreme Court has said about these things and parsing that out.
Okay.
Okay. See ya.
See ya.